familiar scene, isn't it? Some of us have a drink once in a while. Some of us don't drink at all. Sure, most of us will try it before we get out of school, but that, well, may be the end of it. It just depends on what your own particular attitude is. On the other hand, take driving. Just about all of us will get behind the wheel before we graduate. The big problem comes if we do both at the same time, drink and drive. If we are going to drive, and some of us are going to drink occasionally, we ought to recognize some facts about both things so we can make intelligent decisions. Take driving first. We're good. The experts say our reflexes are a lot sharper than adults. We react quicker to emergencies, have a better chance to avoid an accident. Of course, older people do have more experience behind the wheel, and that helps them out some. But we are basically the more skillful drivers. Those reflexes make up for the lack of experience. And what does driving a car mean? Well, you know as well as I do, you're just not with it if you can't get some wheels once in a while, or at least have a friend you can ride with. Just stop and think about it. Of course, there's another side to driving. You know, the accepting the responsibility message our parents and teachers and everybody are always telling us about. They say driving's a symbol of growing up. Well, they've got a good point there, I guess. When you start driving, you're not a kid anymore. That's for sure. We know a lot about driving, but what do we know about drinking? I mean, what do we really know? Well, consider this. Most studies show that a majority of high school students have been exposed to alcoholic beverages. Now that means trying it out at least once. Some statistics, usually in big cities, go as high as 90%. On the other hand, in some places it's as low as 50%. Why do we do it? One reason is that it's something new to try, a new experience, something different. And you know how we fall into that trap, at least once. Okay. Some of us do drink sometimes, but look at where we have a beer. School dance, picnic, somebody's party. Just about everywhere involves driving or riding in a car, and that's where the whole thing gets dangerous. Anybody who drinks ought to know the effects of alcohol. When alcohol, the amount depending on the kind of drink, hits your stomach, it doesn't just sit there to be digested like other foods. It gets absorbed directly into the blood vessels of the stomach, full strength, and moves in the bloodstream throughout the body, including the brain. That's why you can feel it so fast. Alcohol is a depressant, not a stimulant. It acts on the brain like an anesthetic, steadily puts it to sleep. First thing that happens is loss of judgment, memory, and your inhibitions. A little more alcohol and there's loss of coordination, slurred speech, and you can't see as well. And finally, you can't walk very well and you go into a coma, otherwise known as passing out, stoned, or what have you. Okay, what happens to that alcohol in the bloodstream? Well, about 5% is disposed through elimination, and the other 95% by oxidation. The oxidation takes place in the liver, where the alcohol is changed through a chemical process into harmless water and carbon dioxide. Now, the big thing to remember here is that this occurs at a constant rate and cannot be speeded up in any way. Nothing you can do can get rid of that alcohol any faster. Physical exercise won't help. All the black coffee in the world doesn't do any good. Nor will a freezing shower. You can stand under there until you turn blue, but the blood will still be pumping alcohol to the brain. There are several other things we ought to know if we're going to make sense about all this. First off, we're all different physically, so how fast our blood absorbs alcohol and how fast our liver gets rid of it will be different. Going even further, we're different at different times. The reaction to alcohol may depend on our physical health, how we feel mentally, what the mood is, up or down. The point here is that you really can't depend on what will happen. Now, weight has a lot to do with alcohol concentration in the blood. The more you weigh, the less the concentration. The smaller you are, the higher the concentration. If you're a lightweight, alcohol will affect you more seriously. The rate of absorption is influenced by how much and what kind of foods are in your stomach, with carbohydrates and proteins being a little more effective than fats. But don't pin any hopes on this. That alcohol is going to get into the bloodstream. It'll just take a little longer. Okay, the more alcohol taken in, the more the effect. That's obvious. But consider the time element. That's just as important. You could sit down and drink a 3/4 ounce shot of 80 proof whiskey every hour, until at the end of 24 hours, you would have consumed a pint. Now, nobody in their right mind would want to pull such a stunt, but it'll make a point. And that is, no alcohol would accumulate in the body and no effect on the brain. Space drinks far enough apart, and you're safe. On the other hand, a 150-pound guy who drinks a half a pint of 86 proof liquor in an hour or so is just plain drunk and is 10 hours away from that alcohol getting out of his system. Drive? He can hardly walk. Now here's a little information your parents may not even know, and that's what happens when alcohol is combined with many types of medicines. You know, the normal pills you take when you're sick or something. In almost every case, the drug magnifies the effect of the alcohol, and you can't ever tell just how strong the effects will be. It's unpredictable. To give you an idea of just how important this is, consider the airline pilot who takes medicine. He must wait 12 hours after taking 2 simple aspirins before he can fly. 24 hours after taking a cold tablet. So you can imagine how these drugs would affect you along with alcohol. Okay, we've taken a look at driving and drinking separately. Now let's see what happens when they get together. Just how much alcohol does it take to impair driving ability, and what happens when a driver isn't up to par? General Motors conducted a controlled study of the effect of alcohol on driving ability at its proving grounds. Engineers set up 2 test courses. One was much like the open highway, with a traffic light changing from green to red to trigger a driver's reaction. He had a split second to make an emergency turn from one lane to another without hitting an obstacle. The other course, marked out by cones, required a driver to follow a path including 3 curves and 1 straightaway. 7 drivers were selected from a group of volunteers and allowed to practice until they were familiar with both courses. A professional proving ground driver was a front seat passenger on each run as a safeguard. Before the first drink, each driver made 8 trips through the courses to establish a normal performance. Every driver recorded almost perfect scores at speeds as high as 40 miles per hour. Then the volunteer drivers were given whatever drinks they preferred and sent back out on the course for another 8 trips. After as little as 1 drink, the drivers were affected. And after 3 or 4 drinks, they just couldn't make it. This driver has good hand coordination and chooses the right turn, but he's late. He hits the sponge rubber barrel and goes off the road. In the cone course, he just about knocks them all down. On another run, he can't make a decision when the traffic light flashes and drives straight on through the obstacles. Here's the way it looks to another driver after a few drinks. He carelessly spins the wheel, forcing the car back and forth across the 10-foot wide lane. A number of failures resulted from the driver's inability to coordinate his hand movements with the steering wheel rotation. On still another test, the driver's blood alcohol level was below the point where he would be judged legally drunk. Yet look at his performance. He can't even find the 30-foot wide entrance to the cone course and fails the evasive maneuver 7 out of 8 tries. On the cone course, he abandons his hand-over-hand steering technique and spins the wheel wildly. The more the volunteers drank, the worse it became. Doesn't leave much question about it, right? Alcohol, and it doesn't take too much, will make even a pro more liable for an accident. I know, it can't happen to you, but it does happen to somebody, and drinking is involved in many cases. In a Wisconsin study of fatal accidents, 2 out of 3 drivers were drinking. California, 53%. Illinois, 44%. Let me get a little closer to home. In a Wisconsin study of 15 to 20-year-old drivers, guys like you and me, 65% had been drinking. Go a little further. Stop and think now if you haven't known somebody that died in an automobile accident in the last year or so. Was drinking involved? Okay, so it won't happen to you. But there are other things too. There's more chance of a minor accident when you've had a couple. And if you have an accident, it puts a dent in your pocketbook, or your father's, which could even be worse. No question but what you are going to get chewed out. Relations will be pretty strained around your house for a long time, and there's a good chance of being grounded. We get stopped more than adults, and beer on our breath can influence an opinion even when the person drinking is not to blame. And if you lose your license, that's worse yet. It's not hard to do either, because, let's face it, the police give us teenagers special attention. Okay, having a car means a whole lot to us, and having a drink may be part of our life too. But one thing's for sure, they just don't go together. One more consideration, the effects of excessive drinking. There are over 5 million American alcoholics, and the number increases by about 200,000 a year. Over 25 million alcoholics around the rest of the world. These people are addicted to alcohol, need it as much as the heroin addict needs his injection. And they are not all lying in the alley. You can find them behind any door. The prolonged use of large amounts of alcohol can cause irreversible damage to the brain, the nervous system, and the liver. The long-term damage is greater than any other known pleasure-giving drug. Withdrawal symptoms for an alcoholic deprived of his drink are more severe than those of a heroin addict without his drug. Acute symptoms include hallucinations. Alcohol's effect on moral values and judgments? Every other man now in prison committed his crime after drinking alcohol in some form. It can't happen to me? Well, just stop and remember how many of us, or our friends, have done something while tight that we would never have done ordinarily. It can't happen to me? Well, he probably said the same thing when he was our age. Driving a car is a big part of our life. Seems to go along with just about everything we do. It doesn't make a lot of sense to take a chance on wrecking the whole deal, does it? Of course, some of us may drink at times too. But it's up to us, nobody else, the way I see it. So if we are going to do both, the thing to do is drive and drink at different times. Keep them separate. It can be done.